Preservation gives us an understanding of the way Utah's towns developed, and of the people that lived and worked in them. Let's further examine the buildings which have been preserved, and see how we can better understand the saga of Utah's past. When the pioneers came to Utah in 1847, they found lots of desert and some Indians, but they found other evidences of civilization. Miles Goodyear, a fur trapper, had built his home and a trading post in Weber Valley 2 years earlier. When pioneer colonists arrived at their destination, they first built a fort if there were Indians in the area. Whether settling Salt Lake Valley or some remote area of Utah, this was the first concern. Cove Fort in central Utah was built of black volcanic rock. Earlier forts were adobe. Fort Deseret, near Delta, Utah, exemplifies this type of construction, though it was not built until 1865. The next order of business for the settlers was to dig irrigation ditches so that crops could be planted as quickly as possible. Then homes or shelters were built. Early Utah adobe architecture may have resulted because Mormon battalion members saw such structures in New Mexico and Arizona, and because Sam Brennan was impressed by the Spanish influence in California. These first houses were flat-roofed adobe, but the water gathered on the roofs and reduced some of the houses to mud puddles. Then the settlers built their houses to withstand the storms. Unlike most homesteading in early America, Mormon colonists always settled together in a town. Each day they traveled to and from their fields. In this way they shared experiences which unified the community and made it more self-sufficient. As soon as possible, Mormons built religious meeting houses. This too was a community effort. Much of the labor for these buildings was donated as tithing or dues to the church. This Pine Valley Chapel near St. George was constructed by a shipbuilder. Sides were put together on the ground and then raised and attached. Local residents contend that if a large flood came, the building would merely tip over and float like a ship. Tithes to the church were also paid in kind. These tithes were kept in small bishop's storehouses, often located on a corner of the church grounds. They may have housed chickens, corn, or a pair of shoes. The first industries established by the pioneers were to provide the many things they needed most. Brigham Young wanted to ensure the Mormons' isolation and independence from the rest of the country by making sure that they could produce all material needs. Grist mills were powered by water from mill ponds or mountain streams, and some still are in use today, powered by electricity. A cotton factory in Washington County is the only remaining example of another industry which attempted to increase pioneer self-sufficiency. The cotton mission colonists were instructed to plant cotton and manufacture cloth, but the venture was unprofitable. Grapes were another specialty crop in southern Utah. John Nagel built a winery and distillery at Tokerville in 1868 that also housed his polygamous family. In 1878, Brigham Young ordered the winery closed. Besides, 10 years of wine fumes that rose from the basement seems to be all the family could stand. The Granite paper mill was constructed in 1883 to manufacture paper for the Deseret News. Machinery to operate the mill was brought here to the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon from the mill at Sugar House, where it had been used in the sugar-making process. One of the most successful early businesses was Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution, founded in 1868 and advertised as America's first department store. The cast iron front has been declared a national landmark. Attention was turned toward building larger and more elaborate homes after industries had been established which assured basic needs. some were made with adobe walls, many reflected the styles of the area from which the pioneer builders emigrated. Samuel Hoyt carefully fitted stones for moldings instead of using wood. Distinctive styles of architecture developed. Gabled adobe trimmed with lacy wooden gingerbread at Midway, Utah, and cornice molding along the roof line, around the dormers and framing the windows and doors in southern Utah. The early settlers took time to erect public buildings. These buildings depict the dominant New England heritage. When the settlers first planned the territorial government of Utah, they designated Fillmore as the capital of the territory. Only a portion of the building was completed before the government moved to Salt Lake, but the Capitol building has been preserved as a museum. Can you imagine the bearded men in their best black suits assembled for the business of the territory? The City and County building in Salt Lake City was completed just in time to serve as the state capitol building when Utah became a state in 1896. One architect has said that the City and County building is such fun to look at, with its carvings and spires and towers, that it would be worth preserving just for that. Building a tabernacle or church assembly hall often served to unite the people of a community. St. George Tabernacle is considered by some as the architectural masterpiece of early Utah, while the Salt Lake Tabernacle is the engineering masterpiece. Some homes played a part in another aspect of Utah's history. When the United States Congress had declared Mormons were breaking the law by practicing polygamy, husbands with more than one wife were hunted by federal marshals. A few houses provided hiding places for these men, who felt that refusing to renounce polygamy was a test of their faith. The coming of the railroad in 1869 had its effect on Utah architecture. More important was the profound impact on the way of life in Utah. Isolation ended. To Utah came the non-Mormon miners, merchants, missionaries, soldiers, and railroad men. The railroad was responsible for completely non-Mormon communities. Corinne was a railroad town and freighting center. Numerous churches representing many denominations were constructed, including this one by the Methodists. City was a mining boom town right out of the movies. Although the town burned, the Catholic Church and school have survived for nearly 100 years. And in Salt Lake City, St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral is still in use as the oldest non-Mormon church in the city. This was also the time in Utah's history when the Mormon people completed the first temples as the ultimate physical accomplishment of their faith. Temples are designed for the special requirements of the sacred ordinances of the LDS Church, and therefore they are most unusually Mormon in their architecture. The temple at St. George was the first one completed in 1877, shining white stucco over sandstone. A pile driver improvised from a cannon barrel was used to pound rock into the spongy ground to provide solid foundations. The circular windows and battlements along the top can also be seen in other temples built during this time. The Salt Lake Temple, begun in 1853, was a project of such magnitude that 3 other temples were begun and finished before it was dedicated in 1893. At this same time, numerous other mining towns emerged. Alta, Bingham, Silver Reef, Mercer, and Ophir, to name a few. Paupers became millionaires almost overnight. The impact of that mining wealth can be seen in some of the houses in Salt Lake. Colonel Enos A. Wall found a way to produce copper from the low-grade ore at Bingham and built this handsome house. William McIntyre bought this house when he made his fortune in the Tintic mines, as did David Keith with his beautiful mansion. All of these elegant houses have been adapted to other uses now that they are no longer suitable as residences. They are preserved so we can walk through them and imagine how it would have been to live in such a house, to have dinner in such an elaborate dining room, or to play with friends in the gardens. Utah's past is not only better understood when one looks at old buildings, it's more exciting. When in the kitchen of an old house we can almost smell the fresh bread baking, or when in an old church, feel the closeness to God of those early colonists, or within the walls of an old fort, the concern they felt. It is imperative that we care enough to preserve our heritage. I've enjoyed looking at these old buildings so much that I'm going to walk down the road to see some more. I hope you'll join me.